Net gain, networking, encouragement, training, helping Snow Landscape and all small businesses hire, train, retain, and engage the best teams to build those win-win workplaces. Are you looking to thrive at work? Here is your net gain. Welcome to Net Gain. This is Networking Encouragement Training. I'm your host, Evan Tashwire from Jack of All People Trades. We exist to help Snow, Landscape, and all small businesses hire, train, retain, and engage the best teams so you can build those win-win workplaces. I'm excited for this episode today on how to hire the best sales and business development team. I have a very special guest, Neal Glatt, with me. So before we introduce Neal, I'm just going to start off like I like to start off with an encouragement for Net Gain. So with Net Gain, what I encourage you today is really focus on what is that next step you can take to get 1% better, because we're all busy. We might think of big changes we want to make, and that's good to think big changes. That's good to think goals. But sometimes when you just focus on goals and only goals, you can get to the point where you don't execute. So think about what is one thing you can do today to get 1% better. So for example, if you want to better your health, what is that? Is there a 20-minute walk you can do? If you want to get better at work, is there one article or short course or short video you can read to just get 1% better? So whether you're in sales or whatever field that is, leadership, how can you get 1% better? So off of that encouragement, I'm going to let Neal introduce himself. He has an extensive knowledge and experience in sales, business development, as well as now coaching and even sales assessment. So Neal, go ahead and tell him who you are.
Well, thanks, Evan. Yeah, my name's Neal. I've worked in the landscape industry my whole professional career, landscape and snow. And I was in sales myself for about 8 years, 7 years with a company called Case Snow Management. Had an absolute blast working with some of my best friends in the whole world, scaling that up from a single pickup truck to more than 40 million a year in snow removal. And for the past 10 years or so, I have worked with other companies and try and help them be awesome too, right? So a lot of times I'm helping them hire a salesperson. Sometimes I'm assessing an existing team. Occasionally I get to come in and do coaching on a fractional basis. And that's where I got to know Evan really well. Was we spent the summer making sales great for a snow company hand in hand, which was an absolute blast. And to be honest, I wish every company I consulted for had Evan on the back end supporting me, because that was a lot of fun. But over the last 10 years, I don't know if I've gotten down to a science. I figured out a process that tends to work and result in a lot more sales. So that's been really fun. But my whole approach is hyper focused on the science behind sales and hyper focused on the individual and their strengths for how to do that science. And really just making life better individually for salespeople and their earning potential, bringing down their stress level, and for owners, getting more return on all the investments that they're making in those people, and for companies as a whole who are employing, potentially hundreds or thousands of people in the field, and providing amazing careers for all of them as a result of better sales.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And I like that you shared the why behind that of, providing, it's not just about the money. What we obviously know, we need money to drive mission, margin drives mission. So providing that so people have better lives, better careers, companies can better invest, better serve their customers. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the, kind words and encouragement. I definitely enjoyed our collaboration as well. It taught me a lot in coaching, to do's, not to do's, but gave me a chance to really spread my wings. So I think the takeaway before we kind of move forward there, I always like to drop some takeaways for the audience, and you can definitely comment on it, is number one, if you're doing sales of any kind, make sure you have a process, something that's repeatable, that's teachable, that's scalable. So I know you could probably do a whole hour plus episode on a sales process, but kind of what are some quick hitters for that, for people either getting started or maybe refining their process?
Yeah, I think you hit it. And we won't do a whole hour because I don't know. Sometimes it's important, but maybe it's not the most fun to listen to, right? But all I challenge people to do is go think about the best sale you ever made, your favorite sale. Okay. Maybe it's because it was so big. Maybe it's because it was so complex. Maybe it's just because everything flowed naturally. Whatever sale you're thinking of in your mind, how amazing would your life as a salesperson be if every sale was like that? And let's build a process that more often than not delivers that experience. And most importantly, identifies opportunities that are a little fake or not quite true that won't result in the same outcome. How nice would it be if you could identify that immediately? This is what all the web marketing people, highly qualified leads, inbound, right? Well, maybe you've tried it. Maybe you had some success. You probably know that it's not perfect. And the really good ones will be the first to tell you, hey, we can't really qualify who's going to outreach when we sort of set this out there. And so you have to, and that's the first part of the process. And then the second side is you've done things really, really well to get your results. And maybe if you reflect on times where you didn't get the results that you wanted, you realize that you skipped a step or went too fast or should have did something that you didn't or didn't do something that you should have. Well, discipline to a process can help do that. And outside of that, I don't care what your process is, right? We always build one that's unique to you, that makes sense to who you are, that's consistent with your strengths and the person that you are, naturally, divinely, whatever your belief is. You are unique, and you can't run the same exact process and tactics and script that I run, and vice versa. And my job as a coach is to help you unpack that, not to just download. In fact, I'm working with a company who had somebody else in there before me, and I'm there because they're not, and the results, correlated. And they go, "Hey, Neal, I know you got your thing. I know you have your process, your strategies, but we thought you might like to see what the other guy did, even though it didn't really work out." And they sent me over, Evan, a 52-page sales SOP handbook, whatever. And I read the whole thing. Dude, it was good. A couple of things I might do differently, but I go, man, this guy knew what he was talking about. Unfortunately, you can't just give that to a person, especially a salesperson, and have them run with it and execute, because we're not robots. And so you need that individualized approach to leverage on your own strengths to be successful. And what do we always do? Every single person who's good at sales, they all have outbound activity or prospecting activity. They all qualify their leads in some way, shape, or form. They all make sure that they're a good fit for each other. And then there's a presentation and a close. Every single sale in the world has those elements, whether they're perceived or not. It's happening for the sales that are closing. The process is just documenting what that is.
Yeah, 100%. I think you dropped a lot of good takeaways that I definitely want to recap here and comment on some of. So, number one, I really like the example of what was your best sale, because I think anytime you can paint a picture of success, that really helps you long term. So, what was your best sale and how do you replicate that? I'm even thinking through a recent one I closed myself. And, I know the first thing was I'm thinking, well, I had that relationship years before. So I'm like, okay, I know that there's a relationship runway here that
Sure.
comes into it, because with the work I do with people similar to you, well as, you might have some where people are like, I'm drowning in sales, but even still, I feel like a relationship runway can help, but getting a little dovetailed there, but, replicate that best sale, definitely qualify and have that outbound prospecting going on. And then think about, how you got results and, replicate that. One thing I want to comment on that you said that I thought was really good was you talked about the 52-page, sales SOP. I had commented on this. I think it was on the Sima podcast that I did, or I can't remember if it was one of mine or the one I just did with Sima, but I said that I had an owner one time that showed me a deck that was like, I did this great, you're a trainer. I did this great training. I don't understand why the team didn't get the results we wanted this winter. And I looked at the deck. It was like 182 slides, scenarios. I said, the material's there. The material's solid. I said the issue is adults don't learn like that. Adults learn in small bites applied to the job, kind of like you said, individual coaching. So I said what I would have done with that is instead of presenting that in one 4 hour meeting, I would have broken that up a little bit over the year, some of the stuff more preseason, some on site. And I think the same thing with sales too, rather than dumping a big SOP. It's like, hey, what's your activity this week? And as you're prospecting, all right, let's role play some calls, or if you're in recording calls for quality, let's review a call together and let's talk about what did you hear, what would you have asked differently. So any kind of feedback on that.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And I don't know if you remember or if we worked through this, but I have a prospecting methods worksheet, 20 different prospecting methods. And I hand it to a sales rep and I go, pick three. And they go, well, which one should I do? I don't care. I mean, I can tell you what I would pick because I love dialing the phone, cold calls, and most people hate it. And so I would tell you to pick cold calls because my phone's like an ATM. I hit numbers and money comes out. That's how I view it. But that is a unique, weird view that I don't try to impose on others. Right. So if you don't want to call and you want a door knock and you can prove success at a level that works for you, let's do that. You want to do webinars, you want to do podcasts, you want to do white papers, you want to do email marketing, like whatever you want, man. We just got to pick three and we got to do it every day. Right. So that's where we start. And then when we're rolling things out, recorded calls is a technology that I didn't really have available to me. But now my reps who I coach are using, systems to do that. And I can view their recordings, on a selected call, which is amazing, right? And in fact, now they have AI that's listening to the transcripts and plugging into the CRM. So it's less work for the rep in general when their call's recorded. But I can't tell you how many times, just last week, rep called me and he goes, Neal, I had this call and, they kind of got out of me that I was a landscaper, and then they sort of put me in voicemail jail, right? They figured out it was a cold call, sales call, and they put me in voicemail jail. How do I avoid that? And I go, well, I don't know, man. Let's listen to the call, right? I used to have to guess. I used to have to talk about, well, what did you say? What did they say? Well, we just pulled up the call. It was about 75 seconds and we listened to it. And the person on the other end said, yeah, can I tell him who's calling? And then my rep said, yep, my name is this from this landscaping company. And I'm like, dude, you just gave that up, right? He goes, yep, I totally did. And that's okay, right? Like you're learning this new outbound activity, but we used to just get stuck in the mud of like, well, maybe we did this, maybe we could do that. When in reality, it's just totally flawed, man. Deer in the headlights. Guy caught me off guard, wasn't prepared for it. Okay, let's just go stick to our guns then and no more time wasted on the coaching. So it's a whole new world of efficiency with call listening and diagnosis now, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I'm glad you were able to get that and kind of get to that. And I do like the 20, prospecting methods you have. I remember seeing those. Cold calling is one. I admit I want to get better at, and I do try. At least if not cold, at least semi-warm calling
Sure.
because for me, definitely conferences and presentations are big, but then the follow-up after that is really, hey, let's get on some meetings. I found success, but like you say, everyone finds it a bit differently. So with that, what are some traits and skills that a good business development or sales team member should have? So if somebody's wanting to hire for sales, what are some absolutely have to haves and then maybe even some nice to haves under that?
Sure. So, we have got three categories of things, and they're divided into 21 competencies and then hundreds of individual skills. So, I don't know how far we'll get, but we'll start really high level, right? Three biggest things they have to have. They have to have a will to sell, meaning they want sales success and they believe that it's possible. I have encountered people in sales positions who think that salespeople are evil, who think that anybody who gets money for something is influencing or coercing in some way, and it's not good. And I don't believe that, but if you believe that, you probably can't sell, and they tend to have low sales, right? So, do you like selling? Do you like the idea of selling? That's kind of big number one. And are you personally motivated to go do it? I'm going to skip number two for a second. I'm going to talk about number three. Number three is the tactics. Okay. Do you have the sales tactics of I'm going to prospect every day. I know how to have a phone call. I track things in a process and use the CRM. Those are all tactics. There's 11 categories. Number two is actually the most pivotal because I will get people with low will to sell who are sort of depressed about their outlook. And we can fix that. I get people who have low tactics. I teach tactics every day. That's fine. I'm happy to do that. There's this middle ground called sales DNA. Sales DNA is sort of the summation of your beliefs, your mindsets, your views on money, how you feel about rejection. And these are things that are mostly your parents' fault. I can't change them in coaching. One of them is comfortability discussing money. And every single person in the whole world, Evan, has a threshold where money becomes a little uncomfortable or money becomes a lot, right? The grocery store has figured out that almost nobody has a problem talking about money below like $5, right? That's why gum and soda or whatever chips are all under $5 next to the register because that's an impulse buy. And some people have a, impulse buy at $100 or $1,000 or $10,000. But if you have a sales rep and every time they get a really big deal, $100,000 deal, $1 million deal, they get weird on you. You've probably found their money threshold, right? I was coaching a sales rep who, God bless his parents, very working class. They work super hard. He was really young. He lived with them still, 23, 24. Money was not a thing that they had. And so he struggled to sell. Now, this company he was working for that I was coaching had to sell, or one thing they sold were to high end homes, larger homes, and they were selling overseeding services. So the owner of the company had discovered in his experience that if they didn't aerate and they didn't compost alongside the overseeding, the homeowners were always disappointed with the results, which checks out, right? And so he goes, look, no matter what, our minimum to do this service in the fall is $5,000. Obviously, we're in an expensive state, big metro area, big homes, compost, overseed, aeration, not cheap. $5,000 is the number. This guy who was supposed to be selling it, who grew up in this working class home, who didn't have a lot of money, spent more time trying to convince me, Neal, as a sales coach, that we were ripping people off than trying to convince a customer that this would get them the lawn that they desired. And it's just, dude, he's totally uncomfortable selling this, right? Selling poop for $5,000. Doesn't have anything to do with his value. It's his parents' fault, right? But if we want to be successful, we either need to move him to slinging weekly cuts at $60 or $100 because that's his money threshold, or move him to account management where money doesn't seem to be an issue, or find him a non-selling role. It's not going to be here doing this. So I can't change DNA. It's sort of inbred. We can test to it. We can figure out that this is the cap and predict what their performance will be. And if we're happy with that level of performance, then great. But, one of the findings is rejection wipes me out. I don't care how good you are at sales. You're not going to be you're going to face more rejection than success, right? Or at least it's going to feel that way, even if you're getting highly qualified inbound. And if rejection wipes you out, it's just not the career for you.
Yeah, definitely dropping a lot of good stuff off that. Really good stuff. So I think the three high level for business development and sales, you said you have to have that will to sell, that, belief that you can, the belief that it's good, that you're providing value with it. That sales DNA, that combination of belief, mindset, willingness to talk money at the threshold needed for the job. And then the tactics, obviously, the prospecting process, CRM, conversations. That actually goes along. I had a good guest on. You might actually find a lot of value from her episode. Name's Leslie Whitaker. She's also a sales coach that works with organizations. She wrote a book called The Sales Reset, which is really all about mindset in sales. Like, it has some tactics in it, but it goes really into mindset. So I think she would have some valuable stuff that, you might even find valuable. But yeah, I think that's really good. So kind of going into, now that we know those traits that we want to have, what does a good hiring process look like for salespeople? And starting even from the beginning of not just posting the ad, but, hunting passive candidates, the best candidates, all the way through to that, hire and onboard. What does a good process look like?
Yeah, there's so much there, right? So here's when you say a good process, a couple things come to mind too. How do we judge a process to know if it's good, right? First thing. And first thing I would say is it shouldn't take too much of your time, right? So if you're finding that you're spending hours and hours and hours of resume reviews and phone screens and interviews to get someone, then that's probably not a great process. Number two is that it should be predictable of sales success. meaning the people you hire more often than not end up being top performers and stick around your organization long enough so that you're getting at least 5 times the investment back in profit. Most sales hiring processes fail to meet that, right? So let's talk about why. One is they're entirely manual. It's basically, maybe they're using Indeed.com or whatever job board. So that's electronic and somewhat modern, but otherwise resembles exactly what they've always done for 50 years. Okay. That's one reason why. Number two is because they're hiring based on the wrong criteria. So we use those 3 categories with the couple hundred findings as a test before we ever even interview somebody. So when someone applies, they have to pass the sales test. We have to make sure they have a high enough will to sell, a high enough DNA, and high enough sales tactics to even entertain a interview with someone. That would be a hallmark of a great process. Plus, it's fully automated, so we're saving tons of time. The other side of that, and that we customize our assessment for, is that we specify it for a role. And so not all sales is the same. For instance, I would consider account management a sales role. Their job is to keep customers and to get more money out of them. In landscaping, 50, 60% of your sales could be from enhancements as opposed to the maintenance contract, right? And so, for me, non-negotiable, account manager is a salesperson. However, what do we want an account manager to do? Well, they can't alienate anybody. We also can't have them chasing new business as a priority over maintaining existing relationships. Also, they have to navigate internal customer politics, potentially. Those are all things that new business developers don't really have to do. In fact, our new business developers, the really good ones, like the hunters for that role who are just shaking down inbound, those guys and gals don't ever want to be bothered with a customer once they've closed the deal. They're bored. By the time the deal's signed, they're already moved on to the next one. They would be terrible account managers, right? And so what they're going to share in common, well, they're both going to have will to sell. They're going to have good sales DNA. They're going to have good tactics around qualifying and discovering budget and building trust, but then it's going to be really different. And not enough organizations consider that. I'll work with a landscape company, and they want to hire someone to go after commercial, and so they'll look for someone in the trades, and they might hire someone who sold doors and windows and roofs to homeowners. And they go, hey, this is kind of similar. It's all blue collar. It's working with people. Like, oh, it totally is. Except that they were selling to homeowners, and you're trying to get B2B sales, which is totally different. Their experience doesn't necessarily translate. Why? Well, one is when you're selling to homeowners, a lot of times there's an inbound lead or warmness to it. And when you're selling to commercial, that's often not the case. Two is if you get invited into somebody's home and you have to pitch a sale, you kind of look around the living room and everything you need to know about them is on the wall. You see the pictures of their dog and their spouse, and it's very easy to ask and build rapport. You go to somebody's office, it's like playing poker. All the pictures are turned around, right? Well, you have to be skilled differently to do that. You can't just ask about what's in front of you. It's a potentially a little bit tougher. And then, of course, we talked about the money tolerance, right? And that's just the tip of the iceberg for the things that are different. So hiring someone for a role is really understanding the role first. Then making sure your selection criteria matches to it. What has almost nothing to do with sales predictive success? Education. Experience. And I say that because when I was hired, initially I had zero experience, and I've been asked before, how do I find someone just like you? I go, easy. You hire a college grad with no experience that says they can do it, who passes a test, right? Because it's not going to show up on a resume. In fact, it's hilarious to me. After I left that role, that position got posted, and it said 10 years B2B sales experience required, which Neal did not have at the time. And I sent a message joking. I said, hey, I was having second thoughts. Then I saw I didn't meet your basic qualifications. Guess I'll stick to the self-employed thing, right? No, of course, if you change your mind, come back. It's yours. Why? Why would I apply if it's excluding me? Does not translate necessarily, right? So there's no shortcuts to that. Then our biggest secret weapon, besides an assessment that just tells you if they're good or not, is the phone screen that we do. So, Evan, you've hired in your previous work a ton of operators, a ton of frontline laborers, right? When you were hiring, if you wanted to know if an operator could operate something, what did you do? Or if you wanted to know if an accountant could use a system or an engineer could code, what do you do when you're trying to hire that person?
Behavioral based questions. What have they done before is the first thing I'm going to.
Yeah. And then secondly, you give them the test, right? So you send them in the field. Here's the keys. Show me how you start it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we need to do that in sales. Okay. Because if we want to hire somebody really well, then we test them on their thing. The problem is salespeople or people who are applying for sales jobs are really good at selling themselves. They're prepared for a lot. And so something as contrived as sell me this pen is really stupid, right? That's not a good test because everybody knows what the answer is supposed to be, right? Or at least try to. And maybe some people will totally flunk, but if you've hired people who, quote, sell you the pen, that doesn't really work. It's just too contrived. So we use a test to test salespeople, and we do it on the phone screen. And what we do is if you apply for the job and you pass the sales exam, then we tell you, hey, Evan, thanks so much. You did great. Reviewed your resume. Would love to do a phone screen with you. What are some times that work? And we agree to a mutual time. Then when I call you, in your mind, you're probably thinking, because you didn't ask and I didn't disclose, you're probably thinking it's 15, 30 minutes, maybe an hour. I don't know, something big and formal, right? Well, I want to simulate for you what salespeople encounter all the time in the field, which is surprises, twists and turns, and objections and friction, right? So when I get on the phone, I'm going to say, hey, Evan, thanks so much for taking the time. Listen, I'm super busy. It's only going to be a few minutes. What I'm trying to do is figure out who comes in for an interview and who doesn't. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. And then if you hear from me, you'll make it to the next step. If not, then this is the end of the road. Immediately, we've just kind of turned up the heat, right? We've just sort of raised the stakes for them, attempted to destabilize them emotionally a little bit, right? Not because we're terrorists, but because that's what they're going to face every day. And we need to make sure they can withstand it. Some people melt immediately. Some people stick in and do well. Then we're going to ask some questions. And I coach my counterparts who are hiring to have a 5-minute timer in front of them. And we have the questions prepared. They go through them. They're trying to match up experience, technology, and market and that type of stuff. Then when the 5-minute timer goes off, the script is, Evan, thanks so much. That's all the time I have for today. Like I said, if you hear from me by tomorrow at 5:00, it's still set up an interview. If you don't, this is as far as you made it. And we see this is simulating the type of objection or resistance that a prospect will give them on that prospecting behavior, right? And we try and see if they do anything to say on the phone. If you come back with a question about, can I ask how I did? Can you tell me how many candidates you are interviewing? May I ask about the comp? Anything you do to keep me on the phone and get more information, you get just all the bonus points and you're my favorite candidate. The salesperson or interviewee who goes compliant and says, oh, okay, thanks so much, and hangs up, what do we expect them to do every time a prospect sends up that resistance? The same thing. Mm-hmm. Failed the test. Does it mean they're terrible? No, we still might hire them, but we're going to give them a test and see how they perform that they're not expecting and actually simulate what they'll be doing. And my clients are like, this is so creative. I love it. Right. I can't take credit for that. I was taught it by people smarter than me. Once my clients start using it, they go, Neal, this is incredible. 100 people applied. Your test told me 70 shouldn't have applied in the first place or been in sales whatsoever. We didn't even talk to them. Then I started working with these 30 and I only invested 3 hours to go through 30 people. Guess what? 20 failed the test, 10 made it. Then I looked at their resumes, found it, weeded out a couple more. Now I only have to interview 4 and they're incredible. Like, yeah, dude, they just crossed 8 hurdles that most people never even see until they're on the job. And sure, it's expensive. You have to learn a new process. It's way cheaper than throwing them into a role and paying them 3 or 4 months salary to figure out if they got it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That is phenomenal. Like, first of all, I love that listening to it. So I think, a takeaway definitely as a trainer perspective. Number one, if you're listening to this podcast, I know a lot of people listen to podcasts kind of, on your run, on the, while you're driving or whatever. But that last part, if you're hiring salespeople, like you need to go back and listen to that and take some notes because you just got some wisdom dropped on you and you just got something that you can apply as far as that phone screening process. And really for training of any kind, that's really how you want to train. You want to train to what you do. I've done the same thing with team members for collaboration and adaptability of having that, team game where it's like, oh, I'm going to mess this up right in the middle for you because I want to see if you adapt and I want to see how you document. So I think for that interview, that's great that it's like, I want to see if you have that. And then it also, I think really for sales team members, hopefully, the takeaway for that is you want that, I don't know what the right word is for it, but that pushing through resistance, that, I don't want to say non-compliance is in being belligerent, but that the professional sales persistence you want to have to get through that first line and, ask that second question and really be able to, like you said, stay on the phone, fight through objections and, keep following up and having that grit and that sales grit. So I think that's really important and definitely assessments I wanted to ask you about more because I love the assessments. I know we've worked with them a little bit and, you work with them. So definitely suggest people that are hiring or managing salespeople reach out to you about that and see, cause that can help, like you said, avoid hiring people that aren't going to work out and get you better people. But what would you say to the objection of, Neal, that sounds great, but that's just a lot of money. And, I think we can figure it out by ourselves. How do you answer that objection?
Yeah, I don't refute that. You can, right? Plenty of people do. It's just that um, your chance of doing that is pretty low, right? So when we look at the statistics on salespeople, what we find is that more than half of them don't make it a year successfully. And so if we're talking about it sounds expensive, all I would say is you have not considered the cost, right? So, and I know people like this. They say, I'm going to hire 2 salespeople and hope that one works out. Very common approach. And I'm going to pay them only on commission. So I'm not even out anything, right? But you are out something. You're out the cost of the productive sale. So if your sales rep is supposed to be $1 million in sales in a 12-month period, then, and somebody doesn't do that, well, there's a huge opportunity cost, way more than we charge to get somebody, right? So if we really account for the cost of somebody going out, misrepresenting your company, passing on opportunities, polluting your CRM, not bringing back sales, we haven't even talked about the impacts of misforecasting, right? Of course, it's somebody's time from your organization. Maybe it's me, maybe it's Evan, or your version of us, or maybe it's you personally. But like, what's your time worth? And to have them piece out after 12 months with poor performance, how expensive is that, right? Yes, we are additive to the cost of the salary and the salesperson that you're going to spend. However, at what point do you consider the value of preventive maintenance? I get my oil changed every few thousand miles, like my manufacturer of my car says. You probably do too. Is that expensive? Yeah, it can be. Would you ever go without it? No freaking way. Because the alternative is so much more expensive, even if you never realize it, right? And so our goal is to help clients not have that process, not go through the pain of hiring somebody, having them not work out. And in our industry, Evan, it's not even like you get that many shots at it. It's like if you make a hire in February and they don't work out, you have to wait a whole year before those properties come up to bid again. So the timeline and the cost of doing it wrong is way more expensive than doing it right. And that's what we do. And it does cost, it is money in a different bucket. But anyone who tells me that it's more expensive than the alternative has not actually quantified the data.
Mhm. I like that. Yeah, I think really you broke it down to risk management. And one thing I always say, and I'm sure you'd agree with this on sales, is you never eliminate risk, you reduce it. Like this is not saying this is a golden ticket that, if you do these assessments, you'll always get a qualified person. Everything else comes in the process with, the phone screening, like you said, the interviewing, the onboarding, training, sales process, all that comes into place. But you definitely reduce risk. So I think it's really I would say as a takeaway, if you're thinking about sales assessments, account what is the risk of you not hitting your sales goals or your sales targets, and what does that set back as far as if you're, investing in your employees. You have employees you want to retain, but you want to have raises that keep up with or close to inflation. You want to have career tracks where you promote people, but you need money to do that. You want to have investment in newer equipment, but again, you need money to do that. You want to send people to things like SIMA Symposium, Snow Alliance with Storks, whatever it is, CSMs, ASPs, all of that becomes at risk when you're not hitting these sales targets. So then is it worth it then to, when you qualify all that, and I haven't even talked reputation risk. I haven't talked, bad name in the industry. I haven't talked, lawsuits for mismanagement of badly sold accounts. You know what I mean? I haven't gone down the danger path, and I'm sure you're thinking of other ones, but if you
Yeah,
quantify, go ahead. Yeah.
the one I'm hearing more and more is I'm starting to owners. I'm starting to think about retiring. None of my kids want this business, and so I guess I'm going to have to sell. But we're not big enough to get the multiple that I need for my 30 years of work. I mean, a lot of these guys have gone years without salaries early on, right? A lot of these guys were expecting to get couple $1 million for their business or more, and come to find out that they need to hit the next level of size to be attractive to buyers. Well, that's sales, man.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, and that actually goes because you'll be coming right in succession. Ironic word, succession. I just had Phil Harwood on here. I'm going to be dropping his episode right before yours on succession planning. So
Yeah.
that's a great tip. I love how a lot of the tips that people drop kind of tie back to others, and that the knowledge share is kind of all in line. So yeah, that's a great one that I would say to anyone who listened to that episode, to also apply. Or if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking in the owner succession piece, go back once this is out, that'll be out as well. So go back and listen to that and really kind of put those pieces together. But yeah, absolutely, the reducing risk. And one thing I wanted to hit as a takeaway that you said I didn't really go back to earlier was I think it's really important to realize the difference, like you said, between account managers and new business development managers. Now, obviously, as companies are smaller, you might have more overlap early, but I think it is important to really start differentiating those if you can, because as a people trainer, I definitely see the different skill sets, even from a disc personality profile. Like I'm thinking I want my DI, ID driver in that new business development seat, somebody who doesn't care about rejection is bottom line versus maybe that SC, not saying different styles can't do different because I don't want to,
Yeah.
put things in, I don't want to put labels on people, but I'm probably looking for that more stable, good follow through, somebody that's very detail oriented might be better in that account manager role because they're going to say, all right, did we check all the boxes of, is the snow cleared the way it's supposed to be? Did we do the ice checks or we documented or, did I communicate with the client before, during and after the storm? Check, check, check.
Mm-hmm.
That's a whole different thing. So I think it is important to realize the differences in those roles. And that's one thing I know when we worked together, that was one of the things I cautioned leadership on in some of the roles is like, you're looking for way too many
That's
personality
at
styles.
that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That you're looking for this unicorn. Whereas if you split some of these responsibilities a little bit, you can get more the, steady, stable, takes care of the account and the customer versus the new, hunts the new business kind of, doesn't care about the rejection, move forward, and I'll say that's one thing of yours. If I could bottle up is that like pushing through rejection. I'll say I'm getting better over time. I'm definitely working, but for me as a, high empathy, high personality, it's something I have to work at, but I say it this way too. And if it's not natural to you, but you really want it and it's something you want to do, then find a way to make it a discipline. Because
Yeah.
if it's going to get in your way and you like, for me in my business, if I want to grow jack of all people trades, even on the side, I have to sell. I have to face rejection. I have to put myself out there. And
Right.
even the podcast, I have to ask people. I have to hear no's and non-responses. And I can't let them crush me. So it's like, you know what, even if they do, or somebody I really wanted, then I'm like, dang, I didn't get on. I've got to keep learning how to pick myself up faster. And I remember an analogy you used one time when we were talking about sales and cold calling. You said, you know, a lot of salespeople sometimes don't like to cold call. You alluded it to like a boxer that doesn't want to spar because they don't want to get punched. So they're like, well, I'll go for a run or I'll do some push-ups today. So they act like they're doing something, but they're
Yeah.
not taking the contact that really is going to push them forward. So I think in any kind of role, that sometimes that thing you know, and here's another takeaway for you, that thing you don't want to do, sometimes, you know, you got to step in the ring and be like, you know what, if I get punched, if I get knocked out in this session, I'm going to learn from it, but I'm going to go in there, I'm going to spar, I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to keep building up my skills. So anything you'd say to that to kind of encourage
No,
people?
I fully agree. And, you know, what it reminds me of is the sales rep who goes to networking events or wants to work on marketing or email blasts and, build out a funnel, right? That's something and it's like, you know, none of those are bad inherently, right? All those things you described, they're fine. But are they really moving the needle for sales? And that's the question. Now every sales rep needs marketing support to be successful, right? But they're not a marketer. And if you think your job is brand ambassador or getting the word out, you can do okay potentially. You might even bring back sales. But one of the risks we didn't talk about yet that I think shows up when that happens is the profits change, right? So I've seen reps who do a great job at getting lots of sales, but every single one comes with a customer discount, and then you have profits that erode, and then operations, you know, you're adding to the reason why operations always hate salespeople and vice versa, right? But they have pressure, and you may end up with not being able to take care of the client all the way and cancel contracts, and then right back to that reputation issue. And so if we're not selling enough and for the right price or for a premium price, and I get asked all the time, like, what can you sell for a premium price, or to what extent does pricing impact our sales? As long as you're within 30% of a low bid, I think you can stand a shot. That's what I've seen the number be. So if somebody quotes 100 and you're 130, I think you can probably make it work. The more you are, sure, the tougher it is, but really good salespeople can do that or better.
Yeah. And with that, kind of the last topic I wanted to throw, I didn't have this on the agenda, but I thought of it midway, and it's definitely been a passion point of mine working in the snow industry consulting is we heard it, and hopefully this winter has helped reset it a little bit. But going into last winter, Snow Jobs podcast had a great episode on the lowball pricing epidemic. And we really heard from a lot of different people that, you know, two things. One, there was a lot of lowball pricing people, you know, whether it was the landscape that just did snow on the side that didn't care about making much margin because they just wanted to keep people employed. And it was kind of dragging the market down. You know, the brokers is always a thing out there. And also, so it's kind of the lowball pricing on one hand. And on the other hand, there was, you know, property managers or buyers who wouldn't come to the table for that meeting, you know, who were just like, oh, just send me a bid. So kind of from your experience, both in the industry and even with what you do, how would you advise people to combat both of those, both the low ball and the property manager that's not coming to the table to talk about, you know, the value of the service?
Yeah. So this is not a new discussion, even though it's been brought up recently. Um, it is a failure of sales. It's a failure of sales to help customers understand the actual problems they're facing, both in service and budget, right? A really good customer who understands what they're trying to achieve goes to the table to talk about stuff. They reject a bid when it's too low, right? Now, they have pressure too. Why do you think so many property managers have accepted such low bids? Is it because they're greedy? No, it's because they chose a risk, right? And a salesperson at your company, if you lost it, wasn't good enough to help them explore that fully. That's the reality of the situation. When contractors and snow removal talk about this, they're usually talking to me about a fixed seasonal price versus a per occurrence price. It's usually what I'm hearing. Well, a fixed seasonal price is simply a guess, and a risk tolerance. So I don't believe that it's wrong that somebody's per season price is actually lower than what you believe it should be. We can come up with a model and math, but frankly, it's just your tolerance for risk. And you don't get to judge what somebody else's is or say that it shouldn't exist, right? The clients that I've worked with who have been successful despite those currents, got more creative. And so they understood that saying, hey, Mr. Prospect, 200 grand for the season flat rate. And the prospect goes, look, I got a quote for 150 or 120. I'm going to take it unless you got something different. And it can't be just per occurrence. Came up with other interesting models. One was flat rate for plowing plus per occurrence for de-icing. So smart. Why? It introduces tremendous revenue stability. It pays for the fixed costs involved, which a customer's happy to pay for. And it introduces enough variability that a customer can navigate their way. We've seen seasonal variable models before. We've seen lots of models that can provide that same benefit. But what is the customer looking to achieve? The customer is looking at their weather history and going, I feel like I've overpaid for what we've been recently getting, and I want some financial relief from it. I'll find a way to deliver on it, man. That doesn't mean give up on the contract. But most salespeople, they don't think about negotiations that way. They don't fully understand their customer's perspective. They're blaming the customer. Man, tell me you're bad at sales without telling me you're bad at sales and blame the prospect, right? Instead of owning the outcome.
Yeah. This is why I love you, man. You are the straight shooter that people need in that, and but it does make you better because, like you said, it's go back to work at it. So I think two good points I pulled from that. Number one, risk acceptance. Like you're going to accept risk in some ways. Either you're as a property manager, so either you're going to accept risk of I'm going to pay less and hope it doesn't snow as much and hope we don't have as much crazy weather and I kind of get away with it and I'm accepting risk on that end knowing that if it does and I get blown, this guy gets blown out of the water, this company gets blown out of the water, I'm in now for paying for, 10 times for emergency cleanup fee plus paying more for someone later. Or you're going to take the risk of I'm paying more now and it might hurt my budget, but I know that I'm getting, a lot more iron on site. I'm getting more people. There's a process, and I think too, make sure this is one thing I've taught too with, a couple clients I've worked with because I've coached not as much on the sales side, but more the people development, but some sales as well as I'm like, make sure you have people comparing apples to apples, like with what you're selling them, with what you're putting on site. Are they, if you're putting dedicated machines on site, if you're putting dedicated de-icer on site, if you're buying so much before the season, ask those questions and say, this is what we're doing. So you should ask all your all your potential vendors, how much salt do you have on hand or de-icer do you have on hand? How much equipment are you putting equipment on site or am I part of a route? If I'm part of a route, where am I in the route? How far am I from your shop? How far am I from your next stop? To make sure you're comparing apples to apples because you might get a lot lower price, but if you're on a route and all the salt's back at the shop, 20 miles away and you're the third stop versus somebody and you're say, a business that, like say you have a medical center there and you have to be open and you have to be taken care of. And someone else is saying, hey, we're going to put de-icer on site here. We're going to have a machine on site. We have a site cube. We can start salting right away. We have another machine we can plow at the same time if needed. That's a totally different apples to apples comparison if you get down to it. So I think the risk acceptance, and I like what you said about what the customer wants to achieve and get creative. I do like and that has been some of the good talk recently that's come up. I hadn't heard that model of like the flat rate plowing and the per event de-icing. That's a good one. I know seasonal floors and caps have started to get more momentum, which I think is good because then it shows, hey, look, long term, like insurance, you know what I mean? All of us probably look if we haven't had a car accident in a while, which I certainly hope all of us haven't, am I really needing to pay this much for car insurance? But if we would, God forbid, get in one and you see what the cost of repairing your vehicle is, or if it's a total loss, you're going to be glad you had that insurance. And you're probably not going to look back at 10 years and say, man, I wish I wouldn't have paid X amount of dollars per month if I'm taken care of. So I think, yeah.
And, and they're all great strategies, but they don't always work. And I know there's people listening right now that go, yeah, whatever, Neal. You don't understand. These people got bought. There's a new person here. They don't care for any of that, even though you probably haven't had those conversations. That's okay. I agree. It's not a silver bullet. It doesn't mean you're going to win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I still blame the salesperson 100% for not getting it done? Because I don't care about the deal. I care about the results of the overall season. And the only reason you're so wrapped up about this is because your pipeline sucks. You haven't done enough outbound activity. You haven't figured out enough other opportunities to go get the sales that you need to sell. So when I work with salespeople, I never care how many times they get told no. A no is good in our world, right? Getting a decision is good. I don't care about close rate. We track it because it's valuable to predict. But I don't care when you get told no. Man, I have lost bigger deals than most people have ever proposed, right? Why was I super successful and continue to build people that are? Because we take so many at bats. Inevitably, even when we get beat, we still find a way to win, right? And on a deal by deal basis, there's no way to guarantee success or anything at all. But when you're in control of my activity, my mindset, my tactics, and you do it enough times, eventually you stumble upon something really successful. I try and make it so it's relatively efficient and you don't have to propose 1,000 to win 10, right? But, even if that's what it took, we'll find a way to win because sales is more about consistency than it is about influence.
Absolutely. I think that's a great one to close on and a good realistic perspective. And I say the same thing from training. I think that's where maybe you and I have connected a lot is like, just like there's no silver bullet in sales, there's no silver bullet in training or leadership development to say, if you do this, you're 100% going to get the results. You can do all the right things and that employee is still not going to come through and you're still going to have to terminate. Or they're going to walk away, even if you've done all the engagement things, or you're not going to have the most engaged team here. But overall, if you have a good process that you're continually evaluating, getting better, you will make improvement, which goes back to what I said earlier about you don't eliminate risk. This doesn't say here's a silver bullet to win every deal, but I hope what listeners take away is that you can minimize it over time and you can improve your process so that it is better and that overall you're winning more deals, when it comes to sales. So kind of anything to close. Also, where can people find you at if they're looking to reach out, for your services?
Yeah, sure. No, I fully agree. And if you're interested or if you're having a sales or profit problem, I'd invite you to reach out. Here's the way that would go, because I believe we are exactly the most perfect fit for just a couple of people. And it might be you. It probably isn't, but we'd be happy to chat with you. And so if you reach out, here's what'll happen. We'll sit down for an hour. We'll talk about what you got going on. We'll share with you some things that we do and don't do. And if we both agree that it's a fit, then we'll agree that I give you a proposal. And if we don't, then I'll give you a referral for someone who I can think better. Because if I know of them, then I'm going to pass you off. I'm obsessed with finding people their best perfect solution. And if you want to reach out, really simple. Website is nealglatt.com, nealglatt.com. We have a super active, LinkedIn page, both as a company and individually. So that's a really easy place, to fire up your app. I'm told we have an Instagram, so you can check us out there. And if nothing else, put a comment in the show notes and ask, and I'm sure Evan will route you over to us as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll make sure I have your website and everything in the, show notes and everything, but I'm going to wrap us up here. So this has been Net Gain Networking Encouragement Training from Jack of All People Trades. We exist to help snow, landscape, and all small.
With the weather, but you ain't gonna slip and fall with that. Why? Cause we snow fighters, we assaulting that. Get it, salting that. King need this salting rap. Clown brokers, end of the road. This a cul-de-sac. Blackout with white glove service. That's the coldest facts. Sparks flying from the start. It's a Goldberg match. Wild with the snow plows running. We be on a mission. How